After much love and support from our Tier 1 video, including this one comment, we knew we had to dig deeper into the mysterious people Iceberg.
Who are you people?
Just like Tier 1, I got this iceberg from Reddit user RebelPunk2077. The link to the post, as well as all sources used, will be linked down below. I like to go a little deeper on the iceberg than your typical surface summary you normally see, without making it a full-blown novel. So anyway, let's dive in.
Spring-Heeled Jack. Spring-Heeled Jack was an unidentified attacker that began causing fear in London in 1837. The first recorded sighting of him is when he jumped out and attacked a servant named Mary Stevens. She was walking on Lavender Hill when suddenly a figure leapt out and grabbed at her and started scratching at her with his claws. Her screams caught the attention of people nearby who searched for the attacker but weren't able to find him. After the initial incident, several other young women in suburban London reported similar encounters with a mysterious figure. Reports describe the attacker as like a shape-shifting being with ghostly appearance and wearing claw-like gloves. People in London were talking about the strange figure for about a year. They called him Spring-Heeled Jack. Many thought of it to be like made-up stories or ghost tales, but that changed the next year when another encounter happened. One night in February 1838, a young woman named Jane Alsop said a man wearing a cloak came to her door late at night. And he took off his cloak and he was wearing tight clothes that looked like white oilskin. He breathed fire into her face and tried to cut her clothes with his claws. But luckily, her sister came and scared the man away and he ran away from the scene. A man named Thomas Milbank was arrested and tried for the attack on Jane Alsop. However, due to her insistence that the figure could breathe fire and he could not, he was not convicted. A few days later, another 18-year-old woman named Lucy Scales said something similar happened to her. She was walking with her sister in Limehouse when suddenly someone jumped out and blew fire into her face as well. She was really upset and scared, and the person who did it ran away and was never caught. Some men were questioned about it, but no one was ever charged. I guess they couldn't breathe fire either. After Jane Alsop and Lucy Scales told their story, people all over England, including Scotland, reported seeing Spring-Heeled Jack. The people he scared were usually young women. They all said he was a strange man, skinny and wearing tight clothes with red eyes and claw-like hands. As people heard about Spring-Heeled Jack, stories about him became bigger and bigger, and many plays, books, and cheap horror stories were written about him in the later half of the 1800s. And this made him a famous figure in urban legends. As the times passed and the stories got more and more elaborate and crazy, it became more strange. Some people said he could do incredible things like jump very high and even over high buildings. Maybe that's where they got the inspiration for Superman. This could be because of all the made-up stories that people were writing about him. But as the stories got more and more wild, people weren't really scared of him anymore.
You're not even scary. You're not even scary.
By the early 1900s, people thought of him more of a figure in a folktale than an actual real person. The last reported sighting of Spring-Heeled Jack was in Liverpool in 1904. It's still not sure if Spring-Heeled Jack was an actual real person who just liked to jump out and scare people in London, or if it was people getting scared for no reason. Could be a famous story people made up, or a ghost story that just got too big. But no matter if it's real or not, the story of Spring-Heeled Jack from the 1800s is still remembered today in popular culture. Berserker at Stamford Bridge. The Berserker at Stamford Bridge refers to a lone Viking warrior who was a total badass. In 1066, England's King Edward the Confessor died, which triggered a succession struggle. Basically, they were trying to figure out who was going to become the new king. Harold Godwinson, aka Harold II, was named the new king by the King's Council, which pissed off a lot of other leaders who wanted the throne. For this backstory, you're really going to know 4 people who were trying to either take the throne or like keep the throne. Game of Thrones. One is Harold Godwinson, aka Harold II, the man who was just named the new king. 2 is Toasting Godwinson, Harold's brother. 3 is King Harald Hardrada, the king of Norway, aka the Vikings. And 4 is William I, aka William the Conqueror, aka William the Bastard. And had so many aliases. Now that you know the players, you can get some of the backstory. King Harold II, aka the guy who's named king, was in southern England waiting for his brother William the Bastard to cross the English Channel. When he found out there was actually another invasion happening in northern England he had to go take care of. This northern invasion was a Viking invasion, led by King Harold and Harold's brother Toasting. The invading army wreaked havoc on York and Northumbria for days until King Harold arrived 4 days later. His arrival actually caught the Norwegians, the Vikings, off guard, and so when King Harold attacked them, he started slaughtering them. So much so, the Vikings had to retreat across the river, and this river had a bridge, the Stamford Bridge. They did this to create a chokehold to like slow down the English so they can get ready for defense. Well, the English would have a hard time crossing this bridge. This is because on that bridge stood one lone Viking warrior. He was axe wielding and cutting down Englishmen like there was no tomorrow, because there wasn't one for him. The lone soldier held off the English army so long that the Vikings got a shield wall ready for them. Legend says the Berserker cut down 40 Englishmen before he was taken out. And the only way they could kill him, it's kind of cheating in my opinion, but I guess there's no rules in war. They had an Englishman in a barrel and like float underneath the bridge. And then he had a long pike, like think of a spear, to spear through the bridge and basically skewer him. That was the only way they could take this man down. Personally, I wonder how many men he could have cut down on one-on-one combat. Anyway, once the Berserker failed, the English advanced over and destroyed the remaining Viking army. The English killed so many of them, and they only allowed a few to retreat as long as they promised to never return to England. This is actually the historical end of the Viking Age. You know, King Harold just came off this Viking victory, basically ending the Vikings. But things weren't looking all too good for him. Because 3 days later, his brother William the Bastard, remember him from the beginning of the story? He actually did cross the channel and invade. He led the Norman army against the English. And then 3 weeks after the Battle of Stamford, Harold was killed at the Battle of Hastings, and William the Bastard took over England and became known as William the Conqueror. Fulcanelli. Alchemy is a weird study, and the practice itself, as well as the people who use it, are usually often shrouded in mystery. And one man, who is really only known through the books he published, is no exception. They called him Fulcanelli, and at least that's all the names his books were printed in. But who this man really is lost to history. For those of you who don't know, alchemy is a medieval form of chemistry, and some even call it a branch of physical philosophy. They have 3 main goals. 1 is to find the Philosopher's Stone, 2 is to discover eternal youth, and 3 is to discover the transmutation of metals. The transmutation of metals usually refers to turning some sort of metal into gold. You know, think turning lead to gold. Anyway, back to Fulcanelli. We know he was born in the last part of the 19th century, and his books were published in the earliest part of the 20th century. We also know he wrote 2 books about alchemy, and they were very highly regarded in that field. Many alchemists say it was the most prominent work in the field of alchemy in the 20th century. His 2 books were called The Mysteria of the Cathedrals and The Dwellings of the Philosophers. It's also assumed that Fulcanelli was married due to his mentions of a wife, and that he was at least very well educated, if not just very well read, due to being able to write and read in 5 languages. What we do know about Fulcanelli, or told at least, is that he had students, 3 of which constantly come up and are very prominent. The most famous is Eugene Cancelet, who was with Fulcanelli ever since Eugene was 16 years old, and Eugene once allegedly turned lead to gold. The other 2 students were John Julian Hubert Champagne and Gaston Sauvage. Gaston was allegedly the one who saw Eugene turn lead to gold, and John was Fulcanelli's illustrator for all of his books. One day in 1926, Fulcanelli allegedly disappeared, and no one has ever seen him since except for one instance. Eugene, the one who's most closely associated to Fulcanelli, said that in 1953 at a Spanish castle that Eugene did see Fulcanelli again. Eugene reportedly said that even though Fulcanelli should have been clearly in his 80s at the time, he didn't look a day over 50. Remember the point about them trying to find eternal youth. As for theories on who Fulcanelli was, well, there are a few. One being he was just a mysterious alchemist. Another being that he never existed at all. This theory is that John was Fulcanelli and just published his books under the name Fulcanelli. But this theory has holes throughout it, and we don't really ever know who this mysterious but reportedly brilliant man was. Chip Chan. Chip Chan is a very interesting rabbit hole that refers to a South Korean woman who has been streaming herself almost every day for 12 years. Twitch signed this woman, just kidding. She's been streaming herself inside her house and documenting what she describes as torture from the police and an individual known as P. She claims that she's suffering from a mind control weapon from a microchip implanted in her foot. And she claims that this microchip is a Verichip. Verichips are real. They're tiny biometric RFID chips. They're about the size of a grain of rice, and they are implantation chips that are being put into humans for identification, tracking, contactless retail payment, and other uses. Looking at you, NSA. Chip Chan supposedly has an inheritance and is relatively wealthy. I mean, we can assume this, especially since she really hasn't worked in 12 years. She believes that this P is stalking her and is after her money, and this microchip is implanted by the police to be able to control her sleep patterns. You see, she falls asleep a lot on her live streams. You can see her sleeping all the time. And she believes that when she falls asleep, the police are coming in and either stealing stuff, harassing her, or just plain out torturing her. This is why she streams. She has all these cameras set up to try to catch the police breaking into her apartment. She's been living like this at least since 1996. and she claims the bear chip was implanted in her foot in 2006. But she wasn't really discovered until like 2008 when she first popped up on 4chan. Her name Chip Chan is actually not her real name, but since she was discovered and talked about on 4chan, and 4chan has a tendency of naming something found or talked about on their website ending in -chan, 4chan-chan, and she believes that she's chipped, hence the name Chip Chan. She runs a YouTube channel named Mind Control Weapon, which that's about 10K subs. Fuck, dude, I gotta step my game up. And if you go to her About section, you can see she has her own website with all of her streams and as well as a blog post. She also has a Reddit page dedicated to her that keeps up with her posts. Now let's get into the dark side of this rabbit hole. Many people, including myself, believe that Chip Chan is mentally ill. Many people believe that Chip Chan has paranoid schizophrenia. She believes that she is actually chipped and being stalked and harassed by P. She believes that she is actually chipped and being stalked and harassed, and that this P is out to get her money. She probably also has hallucinations that even fuel this even further. For people who've been down this rabbit hole and looked way more into the story than I have, claim that this P is actually a healthcare worker who is actively trying to help Chip Chan. But Chip Chan won't accept the help due to her schizophrenia, and she believes that this P is a bad actor. Some people online, as you can see in this Reddit post, want to reach out to her either IRL or online. Please don't do this. Don't white knight the situation. You will only make it worse for her. She is mentally ill, and the only ones who can be beneficial to her is her close family, her friends, and the proper mental health authorities in South Korea. With all that being said, you can still look into this deep and dark rabbit hole, Agent 355. The art of spying isn't anything new. Rulers and governments have used spies for thousands of years, and it's no surprise they were effectively used in the American Revolution. One such agent was Agent 355. Agent 355 was a code name given to a female spy in the American Revolution. She was one of America's first spies, and her real identity is unknown and still debated to this day. What we do know is that she worked with a group of spies known as the Culper Spy Ring that operated in 1778 to 1780. The spy ring was originally set up by George Washington's intelligence chief, Benjamin Talmadge, and it was so secretive on the identities of its spies, even Washington himself didn't even know who they were. Benjamin turned to people he could trust and to assist him with this task. So he started working people from his hometown in his childhood. His hometown was Long Island, New York, and one of the men he recruited was Abraham Woodhull. Woodhull was effective for a while, but then, his frequent trips in and out of town, he started looking suspicious to the British, so they kept a close eye on him. So Woodhull recruited his friend Robert Townsend. Townsend operated in New York City and gathered valuable information about the British forces and was passing it along using various tricks and invisible ink. The only mention of 355 in any of the Culper Ring's documents appear in one smuggled letter by Townsend that said, "I intend to visit 727, code for New York, before long, and think by the assistance of a 355, code for lady, of my acquaintance shall be able to outwit them." The true identity of Agent 355 is unknown, but we do know a few things about them. One is that she worked with American patriots during the Revolutionary War as a spy. Two is that she was most likely recruited by Abraham Woodhull. Three, she had some sort of social prominence, which means she was either well liked or respected. Four, she was most likely living and working in New York City at the time. Five, she at one point at least come into contact with John Andre and Benedict Arnold, two famous men from the war. You see, John Andre was a very high-ranking British spy who helped American General Benedict Arnold commit treason and start fighting for the British. And six, it is believed that Agent 355 played a major role in exposing Arnold as a traitor and getting John Andre arrested and eventually hung. There are three major theories on who Agent 355 was. One is that she never existed at all. Instead, when you decipher 355 in the Culper Ring documents code, it refers to a woman. This may be a reference to just multiple women who had information, but not a specific woman who was an agent. The second theory is that she was Robert Townsend's wife or sister. There are many stories that Townsend was in love with 355, and it seems likely that they worked closely together. Number three is my favorite. She was Anna Strong. It said that 355 became pregnant and then was arrested by 1780, and then she was imprisoned on the British HMS Jersey, a prison ship. There she gave birth to a boy, and then she later died. However, many historians disagree because women weren't kept aboard on prison ships, and there are also no records of this birth. But Anna Strong's husband, Sailor Strong, was imprisoned on the HMS Jersey, and Anna was supposedly allowed onto the ship to bring him food. and her presence on the ship may have led to the legend that Agent 355 was in prison there. In my opinion, however, I have no clue on the true identity, and I think that speaks very highly of how well the spy ring operated hundreds of years ago. John Titor. John Titor, sometimes known as Time Traveler Zero, was a self-proclaimed time traveler from the year 2036 who would post online and even be featured on Art Bell's show. The first post from Titor appeared on November 2nd, 2000 under the name Time Travel Zero. These posts from Titor discussed time travel, what a time machine would need to work, and even responded to others on how a time machine would actually work. The name John Titor was finally introduced in January 2001 when Time Travel Zero began posting on the Time Travel Institute forums. Didn't know that existed. But you see, that wouldn't be his first interactions with Art Bell. In fact, in 1998, prior to his internet forum post, he faxed Art Bell, and that was also on his show. Art Bell read his faxes on Coast to Coast in July of 1998. These faxes just talk about him being a time travel and that time travel was invented in 2034. He also claimed to not be able to time travel past the year 2564 because there is no future after 2564. He was also a very big proponent of the Y2K doomsday and pushed that theory a lot. A few years go by, and in 2003, various websites start to repost Titor's posts and making stories out of them. From John's post, he claimed to be an American soldier from 2036, and he was based out of Tampa, Florida. He claims he's assigned to the time travel project to be sent back to 1975 to retrieve an IBM 5100. He claims this was needed to debug a legacy computer programs in 2036, and he was specifically chosen for this mission due to his paternal grandfather being directly involved with the assembly and programming of the 5100. John's post then tried to list off unpublicized features of the 5100 to gain some sort of credibility. He also claimed in being successful in retrieving the 5100, and instead of returning to his own time, he detoured to the year 2000 for personal reasons. Titor described the time machine in one of his posts as a stationary mass temporal displacement unit powered by two topspin dual positive singularities producing standard offset Tipler sinusoid. Yeah, even with my mechanical engineering degree, I'm not even going to pretend like I know what that means. Anyway, let's get to the juicy bits. Titor had some bold predictions, and he wanted to let us all know about them. Titor predicted there was an upcoming civil war, and he said they would have to do with orders and rights. He described the Civil War as kicking off in 2005 with the civil unrest surrounding the presidential election that year. He described the conflict as like a Waco type event happening every month, and that would get worse and worse until finally everything would erupt in 2008. Titor went on to post that the USA would split into 5 separate regions and the Civil War would end around 2015. You know, a brief break until World War III kicked off later that year, according to Titor. Titor referred to the exchange of nukes as N-Day, and I'm going to assume this stands for Nuke Day, and that Titor wasn't just being an edgy gamer. According to Titor, DC and Jacksonville, Florida were specifically hit, and the US government had to move the capital all the way to Omaha, Nebraska. Titor never gave specific information on why World War III started, just vague examples of border clashes and overpopulation. Now I know what you're thinking, Jordan, it's 2023 and none of those things have happened yet. You'd be right. However, Titor and his believers are big fans of the many worlds interpretation of quantum physics. They claim since Titor came here to warn us, he created a new timeline, and therefore that's why his predictions didn't come true in this timeline. According to his believers, John Titor is the sole reason Y2K, the Civil War, and World War III hasn't happened yet. So if he got his predictions right or wrong, him and his believers would say his predictions were accurate. Because if he got them right, everyone would be like, see, look, he got them. But since he got them wrong, everyone's like, well, it's because he came to warn us and he created a new timeline. So either way, he wins. Now that we know his bold predictions were ultimately wrong, I will say not all of his predictions were wrong. He did predict a few things accurate about CERN. But now that we know some of his most important ones are wrong, who is this John Titor? Well, a private investigator found out there is no John Titor. There is a John Titor Foundation, a for-profit company founded in 2003 that has a P.O. box in Kissimmee, Florida, the same location as the IP address of all the John Titor posts. And in 2009, John Houston of Hoax Hunter's website named Larry Harbor as the CEO of the John Titor Foundation. Larry, along with his brother Richard, a computer scientist, were very likely the men behind John Titor, which is how he would know so much about computer science and list off those details I mentioned earlier. So while it seems that John Titor is not so mysterious anymore, it is still an interesting piece in internet history. Kaspar Hauser. Kaspar Hauser was a German youth who claimed to grown up in total isolation in a dark cell, and he was stabbed to death in 1833. And once he was stabbed to death, controversy and conspiracies began to spread on who Kaspar really was. Kaspar was born on April 30th, 1812, somewhere in Germany. He first appeared in the public on May 26, 1828, wandering the streets of Nuremberg, Germany. The only thing he had on him were a few letters. One letter was addressed to the captain of the 4th Squadron of the 6th Cavalry Regiment, Captain von Wessenig. From the letter read, "From the Bavarian border, the place is unnamed, 1828. There was another letter found on the boy. It was by an anonymous author who claims that Kaspar was given to him as a young boy, and he got instructions to never let Kaspar leave this house. You figured that'd be a little strange, and you might ask a few questions. Apparently this guy, nope, just followed him. The letter went on to state that the boy would like to be a cavalryman, just as his father, and the captain should either take him or hang him. Both letters had similar handwriting, which later analysts say that Kaspar himself actually wrote both letters. Could you imagine if he did write both letters, and he was like, either take the boy or hang him, and they're like, well, we don't need you, so get up there, we're gonna hang you. Bro was confident he was wanted. Anyway, a shoemaker named Weichmann took the boy to Captain von Wessenig, where he kept claiming he wanted to be a cavalryman just as his father. Wessenig didn't know what to do with the boy, so he took him to the police to figure out what the hell is going on. At the police station, the boy wrote out his name Kaspar, and he proved that he knew how to read and write a little, but his vocabulary was rather limited. But because no one could account for him, and no one knew who he was or what to do with him, they imprisoned him for being a vagabond, aka a homeless bum. While Hauser was in prison, we started to learn about him because he would open up a little bit more and more, start talking about his past. According to Hauser, as long as he can remember, he was in solitary confinement in a dark cell with nothing more than a straw bed and a few wooden toys. He said he woke each morning with fresh bread and water, and that sometimes he would wake with new straw in his bed and his hair and his nails were cut. But other than that, he'd never seen or been around another human. He claims the first human he actually had contact with was the mysterious person who visited him right before he was released from his cell. He claimed that this man covered his face and told him the phrase, "I want to be a cavalryman just as my father," which he repeated but didn't really understand what the words meant. People began to speculate on who this guy was, and there were two main theories. Either this kid is important and has some sort of important lineage or someone is after him, or two, the guy's an imposter and just making crap up to get attention. While everyone was investigating, he was taken in by a schoolmaster named Friedrich Dahmer. While staying with Dahmer one day on October 17, 1829, he was found with a cut on his forehead. Hauser claimed while he was sitting outside, he was attacked by a hooded man who claimed, "You still have to die before you leave the city of Nuremberg." Project got major Skyrim NPC vibes. Hauser said he recognized the voice as the same man who actually led him to Nuremberg. The police came and escorted him to Johann Biberback for his safety. The attack furthered speculation. Believers of Hauser thought it was a failed assassination, which was further proof that, hey, maybe he's like possible lineage to England or Hungary or the House of Baden. Doubters of the story, however, would say the wound was self-inflicted to get pity and have an excuse to leave the Dahmer house because Dahmer had come to believe the boy had a tendency of lying. He went on to stay and leave at 4 more houses before his death. These houses were Johann Biberback, Baron von Tuscher, Lord Stanhope, and finally Johann George Meyer. And the main reasons they all noted him leaving their houses was usually following a fight or an argument after they discovered the boy was a liar. While in the custody of Meyer on December 14, 1833, Hauser came home with a deep stab wound to his left breast. According to Hauser, he was lured to a garden where a stranger stabbed him while handing him a bag. The police searched the garden where they found a violet purse containing a note written in German that said, "Hauser will be able to tell you quite precisely how I took from where I am. To save Hauser the effort, I want to tell you where I come from. I come from blank the Bavarian border, blank on the river, blank. I will even tell you my name, MLO." Hauser unfortunately passed from the stab wound 3 days later on December 17, 1833. And there are a few odd things about this note. One is it contained spelling and grammatical errors that Hauser was known for. Two, although Hauser was eager that the purse be found, he never showed any interest in the contents. And three is the note that was found was folded in a specific triangular formation, which Hauser usually folded his notes. Hauser's believers and haters were definitely divided now. Was the wound self-inflicted? Was it an attack? Well, what did the doctor say? Well, a medical study in 1928 says the wound was self-inflicted, and they believe that Hauser was trying to get attention, but he just stabbed himself too deeply and therefore died. But a medical study in 2005 said the stab wound wasn't done for attention, yet done for doing damage. They said that in 2005, the stab wound could have been done self-inflicted for the purpose of suicide, but you couldn't rule out the possibility of homicide. Now you might be thinking, well, why were people after him so bad if it was homicide? Why was he truly important? Well, the leading theory is that he was the Prince of Baden. Baden is a state in southern Germany during the German Empire. And the rumor is that the Grand Duke and Duchess had a baby, the Prince, maybe him, and that he was swapped with a dying baby. And the rumors the biological prince, which is Hauser, was therefore being hunted. Well, we are in the 21st century, so what does DNA have to say about this? Well, DNA was done in 1996, and the DNA that was collected from Hauser proved that he wasn't related to the royal family. Okay, solved, right? No. In 2002, another DNA test was performed, and it took 6 different DNA samples from Hauser, and all the DNA did not match the 1996 study. So then they called in the authenticity of the 1996 study. Was it botched? Was it done intentionally? Was it sabotage? So the 2002 study went on with what evidence they did have. And the scientists concluded that while the DNA was not identical, the deviations were not large enough to exclude that he was not related to the royal family. So even the DNA isn't definitive. What do you think? Are you on the side of the believers? The haters? Was he important? Was he a liar just for attention? Comment down below. What do you think? The Man from Taured. The Man from Taured is a story about a man from another dimension that arrived in the Tokyo airport in 1954. The story goes that in July of 1954, a man arrived at the Haneda Airport, aka the Tokyo International Airport. Employees working that day described the man as Caucasian and he had a beard. The man hands over his passport, but the immigration officer noticed something strange. Passport, while it did look authentic, the country of origin was the problem. It said Taured, and Taured doesn't exist. Now, the officials are thinking, this guy's a criminal. He's trying to use a fake passport, so they pull him to the side and take him to an interrogation room to get to the bottom of what the hell is going on. The man is confused about what is going on, and when the officials explain to him that there is no country named Taured, the man is puzzled. They hand him a map and tell him, point out to me where is Taured on the map. The strange man points to a small area known as the Principality of Andorra, a sovereign state between France and Spain. When the traveler saw that Taured wasn't on the map, he was like confused, puzzled, angry. Like, where is my home? According to the traveler, this is supposed to be where Taured is. He claimed that it's been a sovereign country and has existed for over 1,000 years. So the authorities definitely thought this man was a criminal and he was up to no good. So they decided to conduct an investigation to dig further into what was going on here. While investigating, they were like, we'll put this man up in a hotel room, but to make sure he doesn't leave, we'll put 2 security guards outside his door. The next morning, however, the man had vanished. The man, all of his personal documents, which were in the possession of the officials, everything disappeared overnight. You might think this sounds impossible, but believers of the story said this is evidence of parallel universes. They say the man is from a parallel universe where he lived on an Earth that did actually have a country named Taured, and that he just simply slipped over into our universe, and then somehow slipped back into his, which is why him and all of his documents and everything just disappeared. My opinion on the subject, you might ask. Well, I love weird theories, and I am a bit of a conspiracy theorist. I believe this one to be a hoax. It seems that in August of 1960, there was a reporting of a man who tried to use a fake passport from a fake country, and he was arrested in Japan when he was caught trying to use it. Reporting of this event got out, the media picked it up, and over the years has been twisted and turned into this urban legend. So in my opinion, this is all just an urban legend, but a fun one. Jimmy Hoffa. Jimmy Hoffa was an American labor union leader who was born on July 30th, 1913 in Brazil, India. He became a union organizer in the 1930s and eventually was elected the president of the International Brotherhood of Teamsters, the IBT, one of the largest unions in the United States in 1957. During his time as president, Hoffa worked to improve the lives of the truck drivers and workers in the transportation industry. He fought for better wages and working conditions and benefits for his members. He also worked to expand the power and influence of IBT by negotiating contracts with large companies and building strong alliances with other unions. However, Hoffa was also known for his controversial and sometimes illegal tactic. He was investigated by the government several times for bribery, fraud, racketeering, and was eventually sent to prison for trying to bribe a juror in a trial. After he was released from prison in 1971, after being pardoned by Richard Nixon, Hoffa tried to regain his position as the president of the IBT, but he was banned from union activities for several years as part of his parole agreement. Since Hoffa was out of jail, he was trying to rebuild his base and support to get back into leadership in Detroit. But this came with problems. You see, while Hoffa was locked up, other people stepped in the power vacuum created by Hoffa's absence. And these people were worried and angry that Hoffa was going to step up and take all their power, which leads us to the reason he's on this list. July 30th, 1975, he disappeared, and he has never been found, and most likely never will be. Despite hundreds of wild theories about Jimmy Hoffa's disappearance, only a few details about his disappearance have been confirmed. Hoffa left his home in his green Pontiac Grand DeVille at 2 p.m. on July 30th, 1975 to meet 2 fellow mobsters, Anthony Giacalone and Anthony Provenzano, at the Mawkish Red Fox restaurant. After Hoffa arrived, He waited for the two men to arrive, but they were late. So then Hoffa called up his wife to inform them like, hey, these guys haven't arrived yet. Some time went on, and then Hoffa's wife noticed she hadn't heard from him for a while, and it's been a few days now and he hasn't been back. Hoffa's wife then reported him missing to the police. Hoffa's car was discovered still at the restaurant with no indication of where he had gone. The last man reportedly seeing Hoffa alive was a truck driver. This truck driver reportedly seeing Hoffa riding with several other unidentified men in a Mercury Marquis that nearly collided with his truck as they were leaving the Red Fox restaurant. The description of the vehicle matched one by Anthony Giacalone's son and used at the time by Hoffa's friend Chucky O'Brien. The authorities were already kind of suspicious of O'Brien due to some recent squabbles with Hoffa, so the vehicle was seized on August 21st. Inside, search dogs detected Hoffa's scent, but no other evidence was discovered. This is where the trail ran dry, and by 1982, the FBI declared Hoffa dead with no idea on where his remains could be. A strand of hair was also discovered in O'Brien's car, and it was tested and identified as Hoffa's, confirming the original theory that he was at least in the vehicle. In 2004, a fellow mobster, Frank Sharan, released his biography and claimed that he could prove that he was Hoffa's killer. Frank claimed that O'Brien had driven them to a house in Detroit, inside of which Frank Sharan shot Hoffa, and blood evidence could still be found. Authorities took him up on that, and blood was found in the house. However, it wasn't Hoffa's, and the police were back at square one. In the years since, number of locations have been searched, including a horse farm and underneath a former mobster's garage, yet none of them have yielded any results. According to the FBI, the most likely explanation is that the Teamster leadership, the people that were worried about Hoffa coming back in and taking their power, placed a hit on Hoffa in order to prevent his return to power in union politics. At this point, it is extremely unlikely that his body will ever be found. So to wrap it all up, Jimmy Hoffa was an important yet controversial figure in American labor movement. And although he did make many contributions to the Teamsters, his legacy is marked by his legal troubles and his mysterious disappearance. Cicada 3301 creators. Cicada 3301 creators refers to the people who made the Cicada 3301 puzzles. The Cicada 3301 puzzles are puzzles that first appeared on January 4th, 2012 on 4chan and Reddit. These puzzles, of which 3 have been posted so far, are extremely difficult, and most believe these puzzles are a test to find and recruit the fastest and most intelligent code breakers from all over the world. Like I said, the first puzzle was posted on January 4th, 2012, and the second one was posted on January 4th, 2013, and the final one was posted on January 4th, 2014. The same day, yet 1 year apart on all 3 of them. At the time of this recording, the first 2 puzzles have been solved, at least publicly solved. I imagine that if you solved it, the Cicada 3301 people might tell you like, hey, don't post it. But what do I know? It's expected that if you solve the puzzle, you will then understand and know who created these puzzles. After completing one puzzle, the participant will be given another harder puzzle to figure out. Participants are expected to be well-versed in topics such as coding, cryptography, encryption, and so on. It remains a mystery on who created this puzzle and why intelligent individuals are needed on such a team. Certain claims have been made that Cicada 3301 is a secret society, while others believe it's a cult or religion. Personally, I believe it could be some sort of intelligence agency like the CIA or the NSA recruiting. Unlike normal puzzles, Cicada 3301 prepares the most unique and difficult types of clues that no individual could solve for without proper knowledge about various important concepts of computer science. According to several people who won the 2012 puzzles, 3301 typically uses non-puzzle based recruiting methods, but created these puzzles to find potential members with cryptography and computer security skills. Yet, the truth is still unknown, and we really can't be sure on who these guys are. The Axeman of New Orleans. The Axeman of New Orleans was an unidentified American serial killer active in New Orleans, Louisiana, from 1918 to October 1919. The Axeman terrorized the city, lurking in the shadows of the night. He carried out at least 12 attacks in which 6 people were killed. He appeared to only attack people who were in bed asleep, which is fucking terrifying. He attacked his victims with an axe, therefore how he got his name, but he also used a straight razor in some instances, and I believe even a pipe at one time. It should be noted that he didn't bring his own axe. All these axes belonged to the victim. He just stole them and used them on them. In most cases, the Axeman would chisel a part of the back door out and then break in before attacking. Also, it should be noted that these attacks weren't motivated by robbery due to nothing ever being taken from the homes after the attack. The first attack was on May 23rd, 1918 at the home of Joseph and Catherine Maggio. They had their throats cut with a straight razor, and then they were both struck in the head with an axe. Catherine's neck was cut so deep she had almost been decapitated. Joseph initially survived the attack and then was found by his brother, but he died soon after. after. A few weeks later, on June 28, 1918, the second attack occurred. This time, Louis Bessemer and his mistress, Harriet Lowe, were attacked. Louis survived the attack, and Harriet would initially survive the attack, but she would pass away 7 weeks later due to her injuries. A month later, August 5th, 1918, the third attack occurred to Anna Snyder. She was 8 months pregnant, and that morning she awoke to a dark figure at the bottom of her bed. It was the Axeman. He attacked her with an axe from the shed, but miraculously, she survived, and she even went on to deliver a healthy baby 2 days later. Days later, on August 10th, 1918, Joseph Romano would become the Axeman's next victim. His head was bashed in and he was found by his nieces. His nieces allegedly saw the attacker and described him as a dark-skinned, heavy-set man who wore a dark suit and a slouched hat. Romano died 2 days later from his injuries. The Axeman seemed to take a break, but then 7 months later, on March 10th, 1919, the Axeman struck again, this time against the Cortimiglia family. Charles, the husband, fought off the Axeman, but he would ultimately lose. The Axeman then attacked his wife Rose, and then their infant Mary. Charles and Rose would survive, but unfortunately their infant Mary would not make it. 5 days later, the New Orleans newspaper, the Times-Picayune, received an anonymous letter from the Axeman. In this letter, he bragged about the murders and ridiculed the police trying to catch him. He also wrote a threat that on March 19th, 1919 at 12:15 a.m. he would kill again. But he wouldn't kill anyone who was playing jazz music in their home. It's reported that that night, jazz music filled the city, and people who didn't own record players went out to bars and clubs that were playing jazz just to stay safe. No one was killed that night. This inspired someone to write a jazz song called "Don't Scare Me, Papa." Anyway, back to the attacks. A few months later, on August 10, 1919, Steve Boca was the Axeman's next victim. Boca survived the attacks, but didn't remember due to the multiple blows to the head. Then on September 3rd, 1919, Sarah Lawman was attacked by the Axeman. She was a young woman who lived alone, and luckily, she also went on to survive. 2 months later, on October 27th, 1919, Esther and Mike Pepitone were the Axeman's final victim. Esther awoke to her husband screaming, and it turns he was being struck at least 18 times in the head and died 2 hours later after the attack. Esther wasn't touched in the attack. Now we know what he did. What are the theories on who he was? Well, there are 3 prominent ones. One, there was really no Axeman. Instead, it was multiple other murderers and copycats. So it wasn't just one man doing everything. Second theory is that the Axeman was a supernatural being who would break in and attack people. That is fucking ridiculous. Third is the Axeman was Joseph Mumfre. You see, the Axeman's last victim was Mike Pepitone and his wife Esther. But Esther would survive and allegedly saw the Axeman commit the crime. Later, Esther moved to LA and remarried with a man named Angelo Albano. And on the second year of Mike Pepitone's death, Angelo disappeared and was never found again. Prior to Angelo's disappearance, Angelo had a business partner named Joseph Mumfre. And on December 5th, 1921, Mumfre visited Esther. He demanded money from Esther, and that if she didn't give it to him, he said he would make her disappear just like he did her husband. So Esther pulled a gun and shot him.
I started blasting. Bang!
Afterwards, Esther accused Mumfre of being the Axeman, and surprisingly, the police had some evidence linking him to Mike Pepitone's death. So, because of all that, Esther wasn't charged with Mumfre's death. It also should be noted that Mumfre led a blackmailing gang in New Orleans that targeted Italians, and that most of the Axeman's victims were Italian grocers. Other than that, there's really not enough evidence to link him to being the Axeman. Hence why it's only a theory. And in my opinion, it's the best theory we got. Selene Delgado. Selene Delgado Lopez, or Selene Delgado, refers to an urban legend about a missing person who initially fascinated true crime enthusiasts before it was potentially proven that Selene Delgado never existed. This case was amplified by a 2020 hoax that a woman named Selene Delgado friended many people on Facebook, making some wondering if it's the same missing person. Ultimately, evidence suggested that Delgado was a hoax created by Channel 5. But what is the origin of Selene Delgado? What are you talking about? Who is this? On Mexican television's Channel 5 or Canal 5 in the late 1990s and early 2000s, there was a section called At the Service of the Community, in which the host talked about people who have gone missing. One of these people was Selene Delgado Lopez, and the case fascinated true crime enthusiasts.
Selene Delgado López se ignora su paradero desde el 28 de mayo del año 2000. Then, in September of 2020, a hoax was spread on Facebook
that one Selene Delgado suddenly appeared on everyone's Facebook friends list. But it turned out that Canal 5 had employed a viral marketing campaign that inspired Facebook users to create a fake profile for Selene Delgado and then manipulate the privacy settings for the account to make it appear to the untrained eye that the account was actually their friend on Facebook. And I'm not gonna lie, I saw this in 2020 and I fell for it. I thought this weird, mysterious person was somehow on my friends list. Then in 2021, a YouTuber named Larissa Dreams made a video using photographic evidence suggesting that Selene Delgado doesn't exist. This video currently has over 135k views, so please check it out if you're interested. I'll link it down below. In the video, Larissa Dreams suggested that Channel 5 used manipulated photos of murderer Derek Todd Lee to create the photo of Selene Delgado. Another video recommendation I can give you on this topic is Next Post's video entitled Disturbing Things from Around the Internet Volume 13. It's a great video that currently has over 5.2 million views, so I imagine you've already seen it. If not, I'll link it down below too. Loyon. Loyon, also known as the Ghost of Malise, is a supposed humanoid figure that is to haunt the woods near the Swiss town of Malise. Loyon is described as a tall humanoid figure dressed in a boiler suit and a gas mask. Even to this day, though, we aren't really sure what Loyon is. People speculate that he's some sort of cryptid, an urban legend, or just a person who likes to dress up and take walks in the woods. The first sighting of Loyon took place in 2003 when someone saw this strange figure walking in the woods. And one day, someone even snapped a photo of Loyon, which depicts the strange humanoid figure walking away in a cloak and a gas mask. The photo has not yet been proven, however, to be authentic or just a hoax yet. Le Matin, a newspaper, published the photo from an unnamed photographer, and according to the photographer, quote, "I approached him up to a dozen meters away. He had a military cape, boots, and an army gas mask, an antique type. I think he measured more than 1.9 meters. He stared at me and then turned his back on me and left in silence." One day though, Loyon left a suicide note. Someone found in the woods where Loyon roamed a note stacked on top of his garments. The letter read, "The risk of a hunt for the beast is too great." This letter, combined with no sightings since 2013, has led many to believe whoever this person was is no longer with us. Up until now, there's no feasible understanding of the being's true face, and it's also a mystery if it's truly dead or merely in hiding. And if this was just a person who wasn't all there or slightly mentally ill, and they felt they were going to be hunted so they killed themselves, that makes me real sad. Madeleine Mccann. Madeleine Mccann was a 3-year-old girl who lived in England with her parents and 2 younger siblings, but one day disappeared and has never been seen again. In 2007, Madeleine and her parents, Kate and Jerry Mccann, as well as her 2-year-old twin siblings, and a group of family friends and their children all went to Praia da Luz, Portugal for a vacation. The McCanns arrived on April 28, 2007 in Portugal for their planned 7-day vacation. They were staying in a 2-bedroom ground floor apartment with their friends who came with them having the apartments next to theirs. These group of apartments were on the perimeter of the Mark Warner's Ocean Club Resort. On Thursday, May 3rd, 2007 at 8:30 p.m., all the parents on the trip went to the Tapas restaurant that was located only 180 feet from the apartment. One person from the dinner party would periodically get up and go check on all the children and then come back. At 10 p.m., Kate McCann, Madeleine's mother, had her turn to go check on the children, and that's when she realized her daughter was missing. She noticed that the window and the bedroom door on the children's room was open, and after searching the apartment, she ran back to the restaurant screaming for help. The police were called shortly after, and the resort activated their missing child protocol. Staff, police, guests, everyone searched until 4:30 a.m. but with no luck. Now that we know she went missing at least by 10:30 p.m., let me establish some sort of timeline. At 8:30 p.m., the parents head to the restaurant. The resort had a letter from the parents asking them to book a specific table at the restaurant for the party over the last 4 days. The letter also noted that the group's children would stay in the apartment and be asleep, and hence why they wanted the table so they can walk back and forth quickly. At 9:15 p.m., there was a sighting of unusual activity known as the Tanner sighting. Jane Tanner, one of the party's parents, who are also known as the Topaz 7, saw a man carrying a child. She reportedly saw at 9:15 p.m. a man carrying a child across the road ahead of her, and the child was a small girl who looked similar to Madeleine and had similar clothes on. Tanner described the man as a white man, dark-haired, about 5'7", around 35 years old, and had come from some sort of Mediterranean descent. It's important to note that investigators took this sighting seriously for a while, but Scotland Yard ultimately thought it was a red herring. They believed this man was another man completely separate from everything, who was collecting his own daughter and just walking across the road with her. In fact, Detective Chief Inspector Andy Redwood said that they were almost certain the Tanner sighting was not related to the abduction at all. The rejection of the Tanner sighting is important because at 10 p.m. there was another sighting of a man carrying a child in the area. The sighting is called the Smith sighting and it was given to the police by Martin and Mary Smith, who were from Ireland and just in the area on vacation at the time. Scotland Yard concluded in 2013 the Smith sighting was the approximate time of Madeleine's disappearance. The Smiths described a man in his mid-30s, about 5'8", slim to figure, normal build, with short brown hair and wearing cream or beige trousers. He was carrying a small blonde pale-skinned girl who appeared to be about 3 or 4 years old, and she was barefoot in light colored pajamas, which is the same clothes Madeleine was wearing at the time. According to the tourists, this man was walking away from the apartments and heading towards the beach. Here are some EFET images of him that were released in 2013. Now that we have a timeline, who were the suspects? What happened? Well, initially there were 3 suspects. The first being Robert Murrett, a 34-year-old British-Portuguese property consultant. Murrett lived with his mother, whose apartment was only 150 yards away from the apartment Madeleine disappeared from. 3 members of the Topaz 7 had seen him outside the apartment shortly after the abduction, which really isn't that surprising considering he lived so close, all the people searching and the police. Anyway, on May 15, 2007, only a week later, Murrett's house and all of his personal belongings were searched. And in the following year of March of 2008, someone set his car on fire with the word spray painted on the sidewalk next to it that said "Speak." But finally, on July 1st, 2008, Murrett was no longer considered a suspect due to no evidence linking him to the case. Prior to that, the media had a field day with him, accusing him of everything. So Murrett went on to sue the media for libel for accusing him of being guilty, and in April 2008, he went on to receive £600,000 in out-of-court settlements. The next 2 suspects were the McCanns themselves. On September 7, 2007, after further questioning of Madeleine's parents, detectives also named them as suspects, sparking widespread media speculation that McCanns were complicit in their daughter's disappearance. But on July 21st, 2008, the Portuguese Attorney General shelved the McCann case and lifted their suspect status. The McCanns also went on to sue the media for libel, which they also won and took home a considerable amount of money. But they put this money into a fund to help still search for Madeleine. Anyway, like I said, the Portuguese Attorney General shelved the case in 2008, but in May of 2011, Scotland Yard launched an investigative review called Operation Grange, which ran until March of 2020. In 2022, German officials named 40-year-old rapist Christian Bruckner as a suspect in the case. Bruckner is currently in prison at the time for raping a 72-year-old woman. German investigators placed him in the area at the time of Madeleine's disappearance, and the Portuguese police named him a suspect in 2022. That's the latest updates on the case I can find. This case is so extensive and is one of the most covered missing child cases in history. What's strange about this is there was never a body found, which makes it seem like it was a planned abduction, most likely by entering through the open window. There were a rash of break-ins through the window in the area leading up to the disappearance. Also, there's currently a Netflix documentary called The Disappearance of Madeleine Mccann, if you want to know more about this case. But I just hope the family can get answers one day. Gregory Villemin. Gregory Villemin was a 4-year-old French boy that was abducted from his home and murdered. His body was found 2.5 miles from his home in the River Loyon, and his case received a lot of public interest and media cover in France. Today, the murder remains unsolved. For years, the Villemins had received anonymous and threatening phone calls, which they suspected were related to John Marie's rise at a local car seat manufacturing and after declining to join the union. A window at their house had been broken in the past, as well as the tires on their car had been slashed. Gregory's parents, John Marie and Christine Villemin, and his paternal grandparents, Albert and Monique Villemin, received frequent anonymous letters and phone calls from a guy threatening John Marie between September of 1981 and October of 1984. According to the communications, he possessed detailed knowledge on the extended family of the Villemin family. On October 16, 1984, Gregory was reported missing from his home by Christine, his mother, after she noticed that he was no longer playing in the front yard. At 5:30 p.m., Gregory's uncle, Michael Villemin, informed the family that he had just been told by an anonymous caller that the boy had been taken and thrown into the river. The police recovered his body from the river a few hours later. His feet and his hands were bound, and he had a woolen hat pulled over his face. The murder made news in France and all around the world. On October 17th, the day after the murder, the Villemin's received another anonymous letter saying, quote, "I have taken vengeance." Well, now that we know what happened, who do the police think did it? Well, the first suspect apprehended was Gregory's cousin, Bernard LaRoche, who had been cited as the killer by his sister-in-law. John Marie, Gregory's father, shot and killed LaRoche as he was going to work on March 29th. He was found guilty and sentenced to 5 years in jail for murder. He was released in December of 1987 after serving 2.5 years with credit for time serving, waiting trial, and partial suspension of the sentence. The second suspect was Christine Villemin, Gregory's mother. Handwriting specialists identified Christine as the most likely author of the anonymous letters on March 25th, 1985. Christine was charged with Gregory's murder in July of 1985, and she was pregnant at the time, so she went on an 11-day hunger strike. Christine was released when an appeals court found thin evidence and a lack of cohesive motive. She reportedly fell and miscarried shortly after being questioned by officials, losing one of the twins she was expecting. On February 7th, 1993, she was acquitted of all allegations. In 2002, the case was reopened and able for DNA testing on a stamp used to deliver one of the anonymous letters, but the results were inconclusive. Following the Villemin's request, a court reopened the case in December 2008 to allow DNA testing of the letters, the rope found on Gregory's body, and other evidence. This testing was also inconclusive. Further DNA testing on Gregory's clothes and shoes in April 2013 was equally conclusive. Based on fresh evidence, 3 persons were detained in June 14th, 2017. Gregory's great aunt and uncle, and the widow of Michael, who died in 2010. The aunt was released, but the great aunt and great uncle exercised their right to silence, which is strange, but not illegal. Muriel Bowl, like the others detained, was arrested and kept for 36 days before being released. As of today, the murder is still unsolved, unfortunately. It's a sad one where an innocent child was needlessly murdered in what appears to be an attempt to hurt the father. Once again, if you're interested to look further into this case, Netflix also made a documentary on this in 2019 called Who Killed Little Gregory? So if you'd like to know more about the case, I'd recommend going there. El Dorado. I know what you're thinking. El Dorado on a mysterious person list? First off, I know. Second off, I didn't make this list. Anyway, the legend surrounding El Dorado changed over time as it went from being a man to a city to a kingdom, finally a full-on fucking blown empire. So I will cover as much as I can about the man and then briefly go over the city if you are familiar with it. El Rey Dorado, the Golden King, was a term used by the Spanish in the 16th century to describe a mythical tribal chief, Zipa, or king of the Muisca people, a native people of the Andes Mountains. The ancient Muisca people lived deep in the Andes Mountains, and their civilization sat at what is now Colombia. The Muisca people had a special tradition. When a new king rose to power, the king would coat himself in gold dust before diving into the lake. As part of the ceremony, gold and other precious jewels would be thrown into the lake. This was thought to please the underwater god. In 1545, the lake was found and then drained. Although they did find hundreds of pieces of gold, the vast treasure that they were looking for wasn't there. As a result, the Spanish concluded that the lake was not the destination they were looking for. So they kept looking for a city that didn't exist. And as a result, the concept of El Dorado, the golden city, city made of gold, evolved from a man to a city to an empire. In the end, El Dorado, the city of untold riches, never existed. El Dorado, the man, did exist. His homeland near the lake was found, but it did not contain the mythical riches that the explorers thought it had. Green Children of Woolpit. The Green Children of Woolpit refer to a pair of siblings who had green skin and mysteriously appeared in England in around 1150. The legend of the Green Children of Woolpit begins during King Stephen's reign, during a turbulent period in English history known as the Anarchy in mid-12th century. Woolpit, or Wolf Pit in Old English, is an ancient settlement in Suffolk named from, as the name suggests, an old pit for trapping wolves. One day, a group of peasants stumbled upon and found 2 small children with green skin, reportedly speaking gibberish, understand that, and acting frightened. All this near the wolf pit, around 1150. According to the writings we have, the children were found and then afterwards taken to the nearby residence of Sir Richard de Calne, where he offered them food, but they continually refused to eat. This went on for days until the children discovered some green beans in Colin's garden and then ate them straight from the ground. It's believed the children lived with Richard for several years during the time, which he gradually transitioned them to regular food. And as he transitioned them to normal food and got better nutrition for them, the children began to lose their green color. The children also slowly began to learn English, and once fluent, they were asked, "Where did you come from? Why was your skin green?" They said they came from a place called St. Martin, and they were unsure how they got to Woolpit. They said they were feeding their father's flock in the fields when suddenly they started hearing loud bells and chiming. And then while listening, they became entranced. And while entranced, they wandered off, and then that's when they found themselves in Woolpit. They went on to describe their home, and they said that they didn't have a sunrise or sunset. It was in a habitual state of twilight. Shortly after this conversation, Robert took the children to be baptized at the local church. However, the boy soon died afterwards from some unknown illness. The girl, later known as Agnes, worked for Richard for many years before marrying Richard Bear, Archdeacon of Ely. And according to one source, the couple went on to at least have one child. So why were the children green and where did they come from? Well, the most likely explanation of where they came from is that they were descendants of the Flemish immigrants. The Flemish people were persecuted and killed by the king at the time, so the kids could have been walking around and confused without their parents. This is also one explanation why they were speaking gibberish, is because they weren't. They were speaking Flemish and the English didn't understand what they were saying. Also, the green tint to the children's skin could have been explained by malnourishment, or more specifically, green sickness. This theory is supported by the fact that their skin reverted to a normal color once they started getting better nutrition and eating other foods. This is all logically speaking, however. I still think it's more fun to believe that these kids came from Middle Earth, to where everyone's green. Satoshi Nakamoto. Satoshi Nakamoto is supposedly the person behind creating Bitcoin. However, it's assumed that this is actually a pseudonym for an individual or a group of individuals who wrote the Bitcoin white paper, created Bitcoin, and then originally developed and implemented Bitcoin. There's been much speculation about Satoshi Nakamoto's true identity, with a number of people being proposed as the person or the people behind the name. Despite the fact that Nakamoto's name is Japanese and that he stated in 2012 that he was a man living in Japan, most of the speculation has been focused on software and cryptography experts in the United States and Europe. According to Nakamoto, the work on writing Bitcoin began in 2007. Nakamoto continued to work on Bitcoin software with other developers until mid-2010 when making all the changes to the source code himself. He then gave Gavin Andresen control of the source code, repository, and network alert key, transferred several related domains to various prominent members of the Bitcoin community, and ceased his visible involvement with the project. Basically, he gave everything away and then stepped back, or at least that name stepped back. However, Nakamoto, whoever it is, owns between 750,000 and 1.1 million Bitcoin. In November 2021, when Bitcoin hit its all-time high of 68,000 per coin, that would have made his net worth $73 billion, which would make him the 15th most richest person in the world at the time. Nakamoto has never revealed personal information when discussing technical matters. However, some speculate that he is unlikely to be Japanese due to his native level use of the English language. The use of the British English in both source code and comments and forum postings, such as the expression bloody hard, as well as the spellings like gray and color, speculate that Nakamoto, or at least one member of the group claiming to be Nakamoto, was of Commonwealth origin. The identity of Nakamoto is unknown, but speculation has centered on a number of cryptography and computer science experts, most of which are not Japanese people. The most notable people who could be Nakamoto, or at least part of the group, is Hal Finney, Dorian Nakamoto, Nick Szabo, and Craig Wright. There have been plenty of people accused of being Nakamoto. Hell, even Elon Musk was accused in 2017, but he denied it. But maybe one day we'll get to the bottom of this. Well guys, that wraps up the tier 2 portion, the most mysterious people iceberg. If you stayed this long, I just want to say thank you so much for watching. Your time is valuable and precious, and you decided to give it to me to watch this video, and I thank you. I'll be uploading tier 3 2 weeks from this video, So please come back if you want to watch tier 3. Also, if you enjoyed the video, please hit the like and subscribe button. Leave a comment if you don't mind. It really helps me out. Anyway, have a wonderful day, and I just want you to know that I love you all.